For this video, I'm going to answer a question from a viewer. I'll talk about learning and sharing biblical studies without getting a degree in the topic. I'm Katab, and this is Hermeneutics. Toledo sent this two-part question to me. How can we read the Bible well if we don't have the time to get a PhD in biblical studies? And how can we help others understand the insights we gain from biblical studies, including folks starting from more conservative views of the Bible? Thanks so much for the question, Toledo. What follows is my opinion, but I'll do my best to answer. Let's start with the first part, reading the Bible well without being a biblical scholar. My instinct is to clarify that reading the Bible well can mean a great variety of things. So the first step here is to focus on yourself. Ask yourself, what am I trying to get out of a study of the Bible? For what purpose am I doing this? Reading the Bible well can mean one thing for a preacher giving a sermon, and another thing entirely for a student writing a term paper. It's perfectly fine to read the Bible through a confessional lens, and while I'm not the person to ask about that, there are plenty of resources out there for people who want to read biblical texts in ethical and responsible ways for their local synagogue or church. Confessional readings are typically better when they employ insights from scholarship, but this does not mean that a devotional perspective toward the Bible is wrong or backwards or illegitimate. So as we think about reading the Bible well, we should ask ourselves what this means and what we might expect from it. If, however, reading the Bible well means going deeper into your study and learning from biblical scholarship, then I've got some tips I can offer. If you're not conversant with the original languages, it's best to begin with a scholarly translation. The field of English Bible translations is pretty crowded, so it can be hard to know what to choose. Again, I would say the translation you read depends on your goals. For instance, the New International Version and the English Standard Version are more conservative translations, so they work well for audiences with particular evangelical theological tendencies, but they're not all that scholarly. The King James Version is beautiful and poetic, but it's over 400 years old. The English language has changed, and our knowledge of biblical text has advanced, so this is also not a good translation for academic use. A good scholarly translation is a group effort by a committee of experts in order to arrive at the most well-informed result with the least theological bias. No translation is perfect, but some that I can recommend for academic use are the New Jewish Publication Society translation, which contains the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Tanakh, and the New Revised Standard Version and the Common English Bible, both of which contain the Christian Old and New Testaments and some of the apocryphal or deuterocanonical books. These translations are all meant for confessional purposes, but they are done by experts and are attentive to scholarship. If possible, use multiple translations and compare them for the best results. So you've got a Bible to work with. What's next? Well, if you're just beginning your journey into biblical scholarship, I would recommend getting your chosen translation in a special edition called a study Bible. A study Bible provides the biblical text along with extensive footnotes that explain that text, and usually some essays and appendices with more info. In particular, for the Jewish canon, I recommend the Jewish Study Bible, which contains the NJBS translation. For Christian canons, I recommend the New Oxford Annotated Bible and the HarperCollins Study Bible, both of which use the NRSV. And I recommend the CEB Study Bible, which obviously uses the CEB translation. One other suggestion is the Annotated Jewish New Testament, which provides many helpful notes on the Jewish context of the New Testament. Okay, you've got your study Bible, and now you're curious and ready to explore the topics and passages that interest you beyond what your Bible's notes offer. You might be tempted to go to your favorite search engine and hunt for resources there, but in my experience, this is most likely to turn up a smorgasbord of theological agendas and very little about reading the Bible academically. Unfortunately, most of the good scholarly material on the Bible on the internet is locked behind paywalls and is accessible only through a university's library. Biblical studies still has a lot of work to do in making its scholarship public. But one great online resource you can check out is Bible Odyssey. Bible Odyssey is a website run by the Society of Biblical Literature, the main professional society for biblical scholars, and a society of which I'm a member. It has a great variety of articles and videos on topics and passages relating to the Bible. You can explore different timelines to see what happened when, and if you have a question not answered elsewhere, you can submit it to them, and they'll try to answer it. You can learn a lot here, and you don't need anything more than your internet connection. Beyond websites on biblical studies, the next step is to start reading books. Take a look at your local public library to see what they have. And if you can get access to a university library, you'll probably find even better stuff. If your library is arranged with the Library of Congress system, start looking under BS, which of course stands for Biblical Studies, and not that other thing. There is no guarantee that every book your library has is top-notch scholarship, but look for books with extensive footnotes and endnotes and a good bibliography. And publication by a university press is a decent indicator of academic rigor as well. If your local library doesn't have what you need, there's probably an interlibrary loan program, so just ask your librarian and they'll be happy to help you. And by all means, purchase books if you find them useful. If you don't know where to start and just want some suggestions on introductory texts, I've included a few titles in the description below. Finally, biblical scholarship is a community, so start talking to people. See if there are any public lectures on the Bible near you, and go ask questions. If you aren't ready for a degree, try auditing a class and see what you can learn. Chat with biblical scholars on social media. Personally, for Hebrew Bible stuff, I follow Francesca Stavrokopoulou and Will Gaffney. On the New Testament side, you might look at James McGrath and Laura Nasrallah. And of course, you can follow me and talk to me as well. Interpreting the Bible doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we get together and talk about it. There are definitely some ivory tower, unapproachable parts of biblical studies, but it doesn't all have to be that way. There are real people out there who are often happy to geek out about their nerdy interests, or who are excited to talk about how their research might give us ways to imagine a better world. The conversation will be all the richer if you bring your voice and your experience to the table. So, read, learn, discuss. Now for the second part of the question, how we can help others understand the insights of biblical studies, especially when they come from a more conservative background. I'll be honest and say I haven't completely figured this one out yet. It's true that many beliefs held by theologically conservative people are challenged by the findings of biblical studies. For instance, there isn't really any archaeological evidence for the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, so most scholars today don't think it really happened historically. Similarly, the resurrection of Jesus is a faith claim, and historians can't really say anything about supernatural stuff like that. So the resurrection is also ahistorical by typical academic standards. These kinds of things can be difficult for some religious people to grapple with. In response to this, I might first suggest that in spite of the historical challenges that biblical studies offers, knowledge of biblical scholarship can actually be quite beneficial for people seeking to understand the Bible within a confessional context. Biblical scholars typically assume there were real live human beings with real-world problems and concerns who wrote the texts of the Bible. So, learning about their history as well as the literature they wrote can provide a real sense of connection between the modern believer and the ancient believer. Though I don't think the goal of biblical studies is to support someone's religious faith or practice, it can often be useful in doing so. I know I myself am often pleased to hear a sermon that is both inspirational and grounded in good scholarship. Faith and academia will butt heads occasionally, but they need not always be opposed. Ultimately, though, I don't think others are compelled to learn about biblical scholarship because a precisely worded argument convinced them to do so. We humans and wolves are not purely rational creatures that operate on logic alone. More often, we function communally, not unlike a wolf pack. We're drawn to people who think like us, and we tend to start thinking like the people we're around. So the best way to show that deep critical engagement with the Bible is a valuable pursuit isn't to convince them intellectually. Rather, it's to be in relationship with them. From my own experience, I've had all kinds of arguments lined up about ancient Israelite, Greek, and Roman sex practices and how they relate to the Bible. But those arguments never convinced anyone around me not to be homophobic. Instead, when they knew me and began to care about my experience, then they had a door open to them through which they were able to hear a different perspective about the Bible. So frequently, the best way I've found to share biblical scholarship with others is not to tell them, but to show them. Show them how much fun you have geeking out about weird stuff from ancient history. Show them who you are and show them why your critical perspective matters. This is by no means an easy answer. Being in relationship with people is often slow and difficult work, but it can be very rewarding. So that's my opinion, for right now at least. I'm curious to know what you think. Do you agree? Did I miss something? How would you answer these questions? Do you have another question you'd like to hear my thoughts on? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.